It is just the beginning of November, but that does mean the clock is ticking for those players entering the NFL draft to keep proving their worth. And unlike some years where there is a clear number one overall pick, this year, sort of like last year's draft class, a little bit murkier, but unlike last year, there are a lot more quarterback options. You got guys like Will Levis, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. But if the team picking number one overall doesn't need a quarterback, is the clear answer Alabama edge rusher Will Anderson. Current number one picks on some CBS mock drafts. You do have Will Anderson. Chris Trapasso likes him to go number one overall. Ryan Wilson, his latest mock draft, which was about a month ago, he had Will Levis. We'll see if that has changed for him. And Josh Edwards likes CJ Stroud. Odds to be first overall pick right now, it is the betting favorite, CJ Stroud, there with Ohio State, followed up by Bryce Young. We'll ask Ryan about his size, if that matters, followed by Will Anderson, and then Will Levis as a distant fourth, plus 750. Let's welcome in our draft expert, Ryan Wilson. As I mentioned, more than halfway through the college football season. Right now, we're looking at some players who could go number one overall. So I mentioned your last draft, you had Will Levis. He said at the time, NFL teams much higher on Will Levis and how his skills translate to the next level than the media is. But given what we've seen from the past month or so, has that helped or hurt his draft stock?
I would be hard-pressed to find a way it's helped him, Amanda, because he's played some not great football to the point that my next mock draft almost certainly won't have Will Levis at the top. It's been frustrating to watch. And the reality is he has not played well. Now, some of that are the playmakers aren't there on the outside, and the offensive line isn't what it needs to be. But at the end of the day, you're the quarterback. You need to make plays, and it's been a struggle. And that's just the reality. He's made bad decisions, and they run the ball a lot. They run a lot of screens, but when he pushes the ball downfield, he'll sometimes press it into situations he shouldn't. He'll sometimes make poor decisions, and it showed up week in and week out, and that's why this Kentucky team is struggling offensively. And while Will Levis, there's been some questions raised. So in terms of physical tools and size, it's all there. But the conversations about Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming compared to Will Levis coming out of Kentucky, they're getting farther and farther apart because he's just not played well. So he needs to have a strong finish to this season and get back in that conversation. But you're exactly right. Over the first month of the season and even over the summer, NFL teams are really intrigued with Will Levis. It just hasn't played out so far during the course of the college football season. Are we still looking at him as a first rounder, or has he dropped out of even that conversation? No, he'll be in that conversation for sure. And, you know, you mentioned 175 days until the draft. A lot can change. It'll feel like 175 years by the time we get to the actual draft in terms of players moving around. He'll be in the first-round conversation. He'll be in the conversation as a top 10 pick because what invariably happens, no matter how this season goes, he'll probably go to the Senior Bowl if he doesn't play well this season. He'll turn some heads there. The Combine will be another opportunity for him to do well. And then, of course, the Pro Days, and we'll be talking about him as the number one overall pick. But as we sit here now, he has not done himself any favors. But, of course, there's a long way to go. And you could do about 175 mock drafts between now and then. All right, let's talk about Alabama quarterback Bryce Young, the second betting favorite to go number one overall right now. What are teams saying about him? How are you evaluating him and his size or lack thereof? Because that has been so much of the conversation. That's right. And every week you try to make excuses for why Bryce Young shouldn't be the first overall pick. And every week it comes back to this. Yeah, he's probably not 6 feet. He probably doesn't weigh 190 pounds. He's south of those numbers. Everything else you absolutely love. You put Bryce Young in Will Levis's body, and he's the first overall pick, and we're not even talking about it. There were some concerns coming into the season about sort of pre-snap recognition and making the right plays. Bryce Young has assuaged all those concerns with the way he's played, and he's carried this Alabama offense at times. He's dragged them up and down the field, making plays with his arms and his legs, as you see here. He does everything well, and he's gotten better each and every season, and you could argue just about each and every game. So all it comes down to, Amanda, is the size. And right now, as we sit here, and I was texting with Pete Prisco about this last week, Bryce Young is my QB1. I don't care how small he is. We've had this conversations with other quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, of course, went in the third round. But more recently, Baker Mayfield was the first overall pick. Kyler Murray was the first overall pick. Neither of those guys are big guys. I think Bryce Young has a chance to be better than both those players, and that's going to put him squarely in that conversation to be the first player taken, despite the fact he doesn't look like he's 6'5" and 245 pounds. Ryan, let's talk about another Alabama star, Will Anderson Jr. Look, even before the season began, he was heralded as the best player in college football, should be the number one overall pick. How much are we looking at in a situation with Will Anderson, that team that is picking number one overall? They need a quarterback, or they're taking Will Anderson? That's right. And this sort of feels like recent years, Amanda, where we talked about Aiden Hutchinson last year as the first overall pick, and even Kayvon Thibodeau when we were about this point in the season a year ago. Beyond that, there was Chase Young and Nick Bosa, and each and every time a quarterback ended up finding their way into that first overall pick. As we sit here, Detroit, Houston, and Carolina have the top 3 picks. Guess what Detroit, Houston, and Carolina might need? A quarterback. They also need an edge rusher, but Will Anderson is in the same conversation as the Hutchinsons and the Youngs and the Bosas in terms of his immediate impact. Chase Young, of course, is coming off that injury. But Hutchinson and Bosa have been impact players, and Will Anderson might end up being better than all 3 of those guys. So you can make a case, and I like to say this about the 3 guys I just mentioned. You can take Will Anderson and sleep well at night as a general manager, not worrying about that pick not working out. You can draft a quarterback and get fired a year later. So Will Anderson is the safe pick. He's arguably the best player defensively in the Nick Saban era, going back to 2007, and he will be a top 3 pick. And the only reason he won't go first overall is if one of those teams I mentioned or another team needs a quarterback desperately and takes one with that first overall pick.
Someone we haven't talked a lot about with a potential to go number 1 overall, Georgia defensive lineman Jalen Carter. Look, he's a lot lower, and the odds 25-1. It's putting him around the same odds right now as Spencer Rattler and Anthony Richardson. You've had him as high as 4. He's been dealing with an MCL injury this season. So where does he stand for you right now?
I love Jalen Carter, and the only knock against him is really the injuries, and those could be more unlucky than anything. You mentioned the MCL. He had an ankle injury earlier in the season. He missed some time, and he came back last week against Florida and looked good, and he didn't look that far off what he usually is. And here's the thing about Jalen Carter. He's 6'3", 310 pounds. He played on the defense last year that had 5 first-round picks, Amanda. 8 total defenders were drafted last year out of Georgia. He might end up being the best player of that group, that including Jordan Davis, Travon Walker, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, and Lewis Cine. Those are all the first rounders. He moves like he's about 235. He is so strong. He is so twitchy. He is so quick, and he wreaks havoc each and every play when he's healthy. I don't know if there's a situation where he would go above Will Anderson, but no one a year ago was talking about Travon Walker as the first overall pick either. Jalen Carter's special, and when he's healthy, he's a game wrecker, and I could certainly see him going among the top 5 players, no problem.
Let's go from D-line to O-line here. There's a guy out of Penn State that you're high on. Who is it?
Olaf Hashano. You didn't want to say his name, did you?
Okay, so I was double checking.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did last week.
Yeah. So I literally wrote to Chris here, like, make sure I'm saying it right, and neither one of us were certain. So Olaf Hashano, it looks like it's spelled. Now we all know. I am blushing.
I love
Go
it.
ahead,
No.
Ryan.
Hey. No, it's fantastic. I love it. So, look, he is only 19 years old. He's a true junior. He is so incredibly consistent, not to mention the athleticism and the size and all the things you look for in a left tackle. He has balled out as much as a left tackle can ball out this season. Very few mistakes. Going up against some top-flight talent. They played Michigan a few weeks ago. He had a great game against Michigan in a game that was obviously tilted towards Michigan offensively. But if you need an offensive lineman, this is a player who could end up going very early and probably will be the first offensive lineman off the board as we sit here. Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern is playing well. He's a little more experienced, but he's not quite the athlete. But Olaf Hashano is a joy to watch. And I say that as someone who doesn't necessarily love watching offensive linemen when I watch a football game, but he takes it to another level, and he is truly special.
I saw a headline recently that said from first-year starter to first-round prospects. We'll keep an eye on him. Thank you for introducing the world to him for those who did not know him so far. What about a potential surprise person who could potentially, Ryan, go number 1 overall?
Yeah, so keep an eye on Myles Murphy out of Clemson. The numbers don't jump off the page at you, but again, he's incredibly young. He is only 20 years old, and he is about 6'4", 275. And there have been some comparisons between him and Travon Walker a year ago, who ended up being the first overall pick. And I say that because Travon Walker's stats, they didn't light up the page either. But he is so strong. He shows a lot of quickness for that size. He gets after it each and every play, and there's a lot of sort of clay to work with to mold the player that you want in a 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. Is he a finished product as we sit here? No, he's not. But that's the whole point. He's young. The physical tools are there. The physicality is there. The size is there at 275. And you see those flashes when you watch Clemson play. And I think he has an opportunity to, he would be a dark horse, no doubt. But again, I don't know if he's any more of a dark horse than Travon Walker was a year ago as we sit here. He's a fun player to watch, and his best football is almost certainly ahead of him.
Right, no pressure, because you're going to do, like I said, about 1,000 of them. When is your next mock draft?
It should be a few weeks. I don't know why they dialed back all the mock drafts. Maybe they got tired of me getting yelled at on Twitter. But yeah, a couple weeks from now, and there will be definitely a new quarterback at the top of that mock draft.
Those 8th graders are very mean on Twitter and Twitch and whatever else it is. Ryan Wilson, we appreciate it. Ryan, part of the Pick Six podcast. Latest episode there. Should Zach Wilson get benched? Beef with John Breach, and also recapping all the NFL trades we saw go down.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.